Are you curious about bodies, pleasure, and possibilities? And what about curious about what others are up to on the planet when it comes to pleasure, sex, and play? Have you considered what pleasure can do for your life, your body, and your bank account? Do you know something magical, delightful, and out of this world orgasmic is not only possible for you, but totally available to you? If you're ready to be the magical, sexual, sexy beast you know you can be, and you just need the tools to get there, you're in the right place. Now, here's the host of The Pleasure Zone, sensual movement artist, relationship and sex alchemist, Milica Jelenic.
Welcome, my sweet pleasure seekers. For those of you who are avid listeners to this show and you're like, hey, this is the most unusual title and show description I have seen so far in 8 years. You are correct. This is the first time I've actually interviewed somebody who has left being Amish that I'm aware of, because nobody else who has left being Amish that has been on the show has admitted it. So I don't know if that's happened. So we are having an ex-Amish expert in health on today to talk not only about her life, but also her expertise, which really comes down to working with nutrition for hormones. And we are going to talk about that because it's so important, especially for those of you out there who are like, oh, I'm so exhausted. I have zero sex drive. I have no desire. And I know that you guys, if you are avid listeners, you know that there are multiple different reasons why that might be going on. You might have sexual inhibitors, sexual exciters. You might have more inhibitors than exciters. The context might be off. There might be psychological things going on, traumas. But when it comes down to certain things like hormones, nutrition is an amazing way to be able to regulate your hormones. And Lizzie Ens is an expert. She is a board certified nutritionist who specializes in working with hormones, especially. So I will give you a little bit more brief on her. Lizzie has given me the briefest bio ever, so I'm probably going to add some stuff that I know about her in the bio. So it's really cute. I loved it because actually when Lizzie's bio came in, I was like, I said to my mom, I'm like, oh, Mom, you got to see, this is like the best bio I've ever read. It's like one line, so concise. It just wraps it up. My mom's like, yeah, that's just how everybody's bio should be. I'm like, then I asked my mom, I'm like, what would your bio look like? My mom has like over 50 years of experience working in health, and she'd just be like, I work with bodies. I'm like, that would be, okay, Mom, you have like 5 million certifications, but all right, that's awesome. Just keep it
I love
brief.
it.
I was like, oh man, you couldn't be more general if you tried.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I love it too. And so for those of you who are listening and you're like, who is this Lizzie Ens and why does she sound so famous? It's because I project the energy at her that she is going to be famous. I like to think that the first time I heard Lizzie speak was I was in the US in December of 2022, which for those of you listening in the future, it might be 2029. But this is when I met Lizzie, and listening to her story right afterwards, I was like, I want to talk to her about her Amish life and all things sex about the Amish, but I understand she actually has expertise in other areas. So I do want to talk about all of those things. I don't want to completely put you on the spot for all things Amish and sex, but I'm sure we could talk about that forever.
Yep.
So Lizzie, I'm
Yep.
really grateful that you made the time, because I know you're super busy and you have a lot of interviews that you're doing lately, especially since your book came out, which is amazing. And
Yeah.
if you can let the listeners know about your book, how to find your book, where they can purchase it, some fun bits of content that they might find in there, that would be awesome.
Absolutely. You go to lizzieens.com, and that's where you can buy the book. And I have a button for Canadians and a button for the US. So if you're from Canada and you're wanting to buy the book, you can go to that Canada button and buy the book from there.
Awesome.
Super simple.
And I will be doing that. I intended to do that a few weeks ago, and then I got sidetracked by I'm so getting the book, because I've heard from the CEO of this station. She loved your story and she loved your book. So she's like, you got to read the book. I'm like, I'm going to get the book. So I'll be getting the book. It's awesome.
You have to. Yeah.
So the title, when I was talking to Lizzie about doing this show, the title that Lizzie sent me, and I think it's such a great title, was medical system failure, what's next? And for some of you listening, you might be like, well, what does that title have to do with anything? It has to do with literally everything. And I hope you guys enjoy, if you're watching the video, my amazing video things going on here. So I'm just going to wait for my producer to allow me to have video again, and maybe I won't be allowed to have video again because this is a fun and interesting day. Here we go. I'm back. All right. So, the title, why I say it's an important title is because so many people are feeling very failed by the medical system. They're not getting the information they need. Sometimes they don't know what tests to ask for. So, you know, you might go in and you're like, well, I have a problem. And the doctor's like, well, what do you want me to do? And you're like, but I'm not a doctor, so I don't know what to ask for. So I think it's great. I want you to kind of just give us a little, I originally thought we were going to talk about your life first, but we'll talk about your life after, because I think we're going to talk about the title first, about like, why is it important to know that so many people have experienced medical system failure, and like, what can they do about it?
Absolutely. Those are all the people that come to me. And I'm sure that you have experienced that as well. But the most common thing that I hear when people come to me is by the time that they get to me, they've gone to the doctor, they have asked for labs. And there's two things that happen there. Either the lab results come back and the doctor goes, everything's within normal range, you're fine, you're good. There's nothing else I can do for you, but they don't feel good. They don't feel well at all. And so their body is telling them that they don't feel good, but the doctor's saying you're fine because things are within the normal range. But the thing about that is the normal range of labs that they go off of, the pathological ranges, are not the ranges that we want to be looking at. So in the functional field, we look at a much more narrow gap of where we want to see those numbers. So let's just take ferritin for an example. Someone's ferritin, the pathological range of ferritin might be 25 to 300. If you get to a 30, they're going to be like, hey, you're fine because you're in the normal range. Yeah. And that's a problem that we run into, is the ranges are so wide, and as long as they're not in the red, the doctor's going to go, I don't know, or I can't help you. I had someone tell me last week that her doctor told her that she has to get worse before she can get better, which meant she has to get worse before he can help her, because the medication was the answer. So they needed to get to a certain level in the labs, low enough in order for the doctor to prescribe the medication. But the reality is we don't have to wait, and we don't have to get worse in order to get better. That's one. And then the second thing about medical system failure is our insurance. I'm not sure, I'm a little familiar with Canada insurance and how the healthcare system works there, but in the US and even in other parts of the world as well, because I have clients from other areas of the world too, the insurance will only cover so much. And so some doctors are strapped because they're tied to the insurance companies, where they are not actually able to order the labs that they need to, because they have these set of rules to follow, and they're in this little box of symptoms. So if a client doesn't fit in that box of symptoms, they're not going to order the labs that they need to order. And then the other part of that I've experienced is some doctors won't order the labs because they don't know how to read them, or they don't know what to do about them if they are off. And so they don't want to deal with them.
I have to totally agree with you. I have a lot of people who will show up and go, these are my results. I'm like, so what did your doctor say about your results? My doctor didn't say anything. I'm like, so why on earth did your doctor send you to get this lab work done and then give you no information after? Or they tell you you're normal, and yes, it's that range, right, of 30 to 300, and you're at 75, so you're normal, or you're at 30, so you're anemic. And you're like, but wait a second, I'm anemic. Well, when we were talking about blood ferritin levels, and look at my beautiful video again. The universe is doing some beautiful art with me today. For those of you who are watching, I'm just like, wow, fascinating. We'll get this back on track. But for those of you who are not watching video, you get to have the beauty of my voice not stopping. So good for you, because we've had that experience before too, haven't we? So you guys are awesome listeners that you have the patience to be listening for 8 years of sometimes my interrupted internet. So I appreciate that. So some of the other things, I know you do a lot of things with lab work, especially blood work. And you do a bunch of other, you request a bunch of other labs. So what are some of the things that when you're working with people that you find are some of the key factors that you look at to determine what they need?
Absolutely. It surprises me how few doctors check cortisol. Cortisol is such a big one, and it always surprises me how few doctors check that one. That's one. And then the other thing is connecting the dots with the thyroid and then looking at just a general CMP, CBC, and looking at the potential vitamin and mineral deficiencies in there. So we're always looking for clues. When doctors look at labs, they're looking for diagnosis.
Yes.
When I look at labs, I'm looking for clues of what is the body telling us and where are there imbalances and where do we need to bring things in? What do we need to bring in to help start the body heal and bring homeostasis back into the body? So in the functional field and where I work in, it's not about looking for a diagnosis, it's looking for clues and pieces of the puzzle of why is the body feeling the way that it is and what can we do about it. So we're looking for insufficiency and deficiency. And 9 times out of 10, within that first week of getting someone on the right nutrition plan and bringing some supplements in to bring those deficiencies up and bringing like adequate levels of vitamins and minerals in, they start feeling better. So it's about looking for those clues and looking for the root causes of things. An example would be your thyroid. A thyroid problem is never just a thyroid problem. It's always going to be something else. So how well is your liver functioning? What's the cholesterol doing? If someone has cholesterol that's really off, well, the chances are pretty high that there's something going to be happening within the thyroid as well. And if the liver's not functioning properly, the thyroid conversion may be affected because 60% of that thyroid conversion happens in the liver. So we have to look at the organs as well.
Absolutely.
Looking for pieces, yeah.
And I think that's one thing that in allopathic medicine, it often gets missed, right? Because you're right, they're looking for, you have to give a diagnosis. In order, I think also part of it is in order to get paid, you have to have, as a doctor, and I could be wrong about this, but as far as I know in Canada is that if, as long as you have a diagnosis, even if you're diagnosing that the person has a cold, then you can charge. So in Canada, we have a healthcare system where most things are covered, not all things, but most things. And then some people go to private doctors, and then there's, of course, there's insurance that covers other things too. But and I don't go to doctors, so I don't remember what it's like. I haven't been for like 25 years. Yeah. Anyhow, I think one of the things that happens is that there usually is the need for a diagnosis in order to get payment. Too bad my grandpa's not alive still. He was an allopathic doctor. I could have asked him. But I know that even for him, when the medical system changed in Canada, it was hugely disappointing for him when he was actually disappointed when we got coverage. He said because he couldn't spend the time that he wanted to with his patients, because he was allotted a certain amount of time that he could get covered for. He was only allowed to cover a certain number of issues at a time. But he was a country doctor, so he would still drive and do like house calls. And he would just say that people went to his office because people couldn't go. So he just did his job.
Wow.
But he was old school, right? He studied medicine in the 1940s. So he was still studying when things were just on the edge of switching over from what we would have as more what we would call functional medicine now to what is now more allopathic or using pharmaceuticals, right? So it was kind of that time and age of things switching over. So at one point I actually looked in my grandpa's like collection of, he had this like really great thing under his in his office. He had a home office, and in his home office he had this cupboard, and in the cupboard he had like old homeopathic medicines in bottles, and he had his own like little lab where he would make his own remedies. And for the for the people who couldn't afford stuff, he's like, here's a little, slap this on, and he would make his own little things in his secret lab in his house. It was very cool. But he was an unusual doctor, but he was actually my inspiration for working with bodies in general. And I would look at his medical textbooks when I was a kid. It was just like fun for me to go to his house and let's go look at the biggest cyst you ever saw, Grandpa. Let's look at that in a medical textbook. And he would be like, here you go. Here's the biggest cyst I ever saw. So that was always fun. But yeah,
awesome.
so I think there is a way that we can be like, I bring this up because I think there is a way that we can actually work. Functional medicine can absolutely work with allopathic medicine. And it's funny because most functional medical people know this. It's the allopathic people who are in denial that this would actually be a really good fit. So I'm looking forward to the day when there is like a union and everybody is working together, and the approach is very inclusive and very holistic. That'll be amazing. I'm looking forward to it. I do think it's going to happen. I know in some countries, even in Europe, especially in Germany, there's a lot more crossover, which is quite cool that exists. So
yeah.
I wanted to talk to you more about some things. We're going to head to our first commercial break because 15 minutes on this show goes really fast, and the show will be over in 5 seconds more. We don't feel like that. So so listeners, thank you for listening. We're going to have a commercial break. We're not leaving yet. You're listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network, and we'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for The Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Are you a subject matter expert? Are you here to share your expertise with an audience waiting to hear from you in only the way you can deliver? Are you ready to have your voice amplified across the airwaves? Inspired Choices Network has a global radio platform streaming to millions of people across the world. Professionally produced and supported by an accomplished team every step of the way, you can broadcast from anywhere in the world, knowing your voice matters, and we ensure it is delivered with ease and efficiency. Eager to hear your message, the world awaits. Contact us today to become an Inspired Choices Network radio host. Email become a host at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com.
This is The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com. You could also make the choice to ask or comment by email. info@milicajelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, my sweet pleasure seekers. Tonight I'm having an awesomely fun conversation with Miss Lizzie Ens, Mrs. Lizzie Ens. She's married, so she's Mrs. Miss. I always get those wrong. Doesn't matter. It's Lizzie Ens. So we are talking all about, well, the conversation really is about health, but we are also looking at different aspects of health, how maybe the medical system has failed a lot of people, why it's failed, some of the things that it's lacking, and it's not necessarily the fault of physicians. It's fault of the systems, I think. That the systems are not set up for people to be successful. unless you're going to private practices, especially in the US, if you're going to some of the private practices where they can do the work that they would actually like to do, it's a little bit tricky. So, and we're not here to knock the medical profession either. We're here to be like grateful for them, because, you know, if right now I fell out of this chair, and even though it's a shortfall, but I cracked my head open, and I would want somebody to be able to like stitch that up. Although technically I could, but it's really hard to stitch my own head up without like a mirror. But I'd want somebody to be there just to like make sure that I was going to be fine, right? So absolutely, there's a place for everything. And what Lizzie was talking about before break was that when she's working with people and looking at their labs and different things that are showing up, like mineral deficiencies, thyroid function, different hormones that are maybe low or high, or even ferritin levels, and what does that mean, and what you can do for people nutritionally, and the importance of nutrition and getting people on different vitamins and minerals so that their bodies can function optimally. And I know for some of you are like, yeah, whatever, it's food, it's nutrition. But guess what? If you have crappy nutrition, you have a crappy sex life. I know that that sounds silly to some of you listening. You're like, yeah, why does it matter? Oh, it matters. And I bet you that Lizzie knows why. So let's ask her. So Lizzie, what would be the impact on somebody's sex life if they are having, let's say, for example, like they have a daily, I'll give you a daily diet, and I'll give you some random labs, just like off the top of my head. Just okay. So, okay. So the person's eating, so for breakfast, they're eating, let's say they're having 3 cups of coffee with two double doubles. They're having 3 double doubles of coffee in the morning. They're also having some deep fried potatoes, because that's what they really love. We're gonna deep fry them in canola oil, and then we're gonna have some side order of, I gotta think of something gross. Like, I don't eat this stuff, so I gotta think of it. We're gonna slap on some, just for fun, on the potatoes, we're just gonna put like 4 tablespoons of ketchup. And then on the side of that, because we want to be healthy, we're gonna have maybe like a slice of orange, but only one, because you don't want to overdo the fruit or anything like that, right? Because you just, in case, you don't want to go too far on that. And then, you know, you want to have like a really nice big hunk of white bread. And then your labs come back and your body is showing like, wait a second, you have really low iron. You have really low vitamin C, because I know that Lizzie loves vitamin C. You have really low vitamin C. You have, look, your cortisol is insane. What's going on? And wait a second, what else do you have? You're not, I can also tell that there's something else going on, and you reported that you're not sleeping, and I don't know why that would be. Like, if somebody actually came to you with that kind of situation, right? Like, what would their sex life be like? Can you imagine? Like, how would their body be functioning?
Well, they're probably in adrenal fatigue, and they're probably, and because of that, their cortisol is also all checked up. So they're not sleeping. They're probably waking up at like 2 a.m. every morning, being awake for an hour. I can also tell you that their cholesterol is probably completely checked up, which means their thyroid is potentially off as well, which the thyroid is the metabolism, is the fuel to your metabolism. So that's probably going on. And my guess is they're extremely inflamed and bloated, and probably have some constipation going on. And so think about that, and low energy. Like, they're gonna have pretty low energy, right? Yeah. So if you feel like that, are you really gonna feel sexy?
Right?
No, probably not. You're going to be like, get off of me. I don't have time for you, because I just worked all day. I have no energy. I don't want to be touched because I feel disgusting.
Yeah, absolutely.
And on top of that,
this is how nutrition can affect your sex life. Yes.
And on top of that, they're probably not exercising. They're probably not working out. So their testosterone is, in the pits.
Way low.
And their endorphins are low. And they're potentially depressed.
Potentially, yes.
Potentially.
More than likely.
Potentially, more than likely. The odds are really
I like that you said
high.
potentially. The chances are really high that there's some depression. We're laughing about this, but this is really common. This is like probably like the most common scenario of like people that I come across. So that's why I kind of like throwing it out there. And I laugh, but I'm sad about it because I also think it's devastating that we don't have the information, or that if we are given the information about how to work our health, we're like, I don't have the time. And I think one of the things that most I hear from most people is, it sounds like so much work, when I'm like, these are some key things you could just change in your daily life. Like, I'm not asking you to become a new person and start a new religion. I'm just asking you to change a few things. Starting a new religion is a big job. Like, think about what Jesus had to do that. So I'm not asking you to do that.
That's a whole different thing.
You, it's a whole other situation. I'm just asking you to change a few things to get your life back on track.
So let's take that breakfast, for example, and just give a couple examples of how you can actually make that better. All right.
Yeah.
So instead of having 3 cups of double shot coffees, you're going to eat breakfast first before you drink the coffee. Okay. You're actually going to put some cream or milk in the coffee so that the caffeine doesn't spike your blood sugars as much, and it doesn't affect your cortisol as much, therefore doesn't affect your adrenals as much. So you can put a little bit of that and some maple syrup or honey in it, and it's going to keep it a little bit more stable. And then with the potatoes, what we're going to do is have some protein with it. You're going to have potatoes, have them fried in canola oil if you want to. We're just going to make it a little bit better. We're going to make a hash and do like onions and bell peppers. And we're going to make a potato hash with onions and bell peppers and eggs. And then you have an orange with it. That's it. And sometimes if it sounds overwhelming, what you need to do is go, okay, let's look at what I'm already doing and how can I just change 2 things that is going to make it better. And that's where you start, because what I tell my clients is you can't get to step 10 if you cannot do step 1. You have to do step 1 first and work your way all the way up to step 10, 20, 40, whatever step you want to get to. But it shouldn't be so overwhelming that it paralyzes you to the point of not being able to start. So you have to start small.
And I have heard so many people feel like, you know, sometimes after advice are being given, even from like functional medical doctors, like they feel overwhelmed, right? They're like, whoa, I have to take, I got to do all of these changes. And you're right. It's like one at a time, and you add, and it's like, so this week you might start with 1 vitamin, and the next week you're going to add another vitamin, and it's okay. Like, we're not trying to change you 100%, because that's also an overwhelm emotionally. And if you're overwhelmed emotionally, you're not going to be successful usually, unless you're somebody who thrives on that. And for those of you who love like listening to this show, you know, you've heard conversations about BDSM, and people sometimes love having the not being successful. It's like a turn on. So if it's your turn on to not be successful, that's cool too, but that's like a whole other conversation.
Is that a thing?
Different topic. Yeah. People love punishment. Oh, girlfriend, we can talk about that. Yeah, it's a thing. I actually have a friend, her entire career is based on she's a BDSM coach, life coach, and she actually like and she's a dominatrix, and she will, if somebody needs to like a spanking to get them motivated, she spanks them to get them motivated. She does a lot of things. I've had her on the show a few times, so she's fascinating. Her life is very cool. But that is how she operates, and she actually works people out of a lot of their trauma using those methods. So for some people who need that kind of approach, that does exist, but a lot of people don't. A lot of people just need to know that there's a simple method. You can get your vitamins, you can get your minerals, you can do certain things, get your enzymes up there so you're actually breaking down the food. Get your body so it's less stressed, right? So those cortisol levels, when they're spiking, your body is too stressed to heal. And for those of you who listen to the show, you know I've talked about this a million times. It's like that signal that goes from your amygdala to your thyroid to your adrenals, and this cycle that happens, and it's like it keeps your body in fight or flight. And until that calms down, you are going to be in a jacked up mode for a really long time. And when we are, unless that is your pleasure center where you really love being like stressed and under duress. And for some people, that's true. If that's your pleasure center, that's different. But for most people, it's actually incredibly debilitating for their sex life. So you want to be able to get your body to a place where you are feeling like Lizzie was talking about homeostasis. It was really good for bringing the sex drive back.
Yeah.
Actually knowing what your body likes when it's not under stress, and then not having to respond out of like reaction, because I think too, when we're on really high, like when your cortisol is really high, or if your adrenals, if you're feeling burned out or stressed out, your reactions to people are going to be very different than if you are calm and your body is in homeostasis. You're going to have anger reactions, which are going to cause problems in a relationship in the long run. And I know it seems like, why on earth would your body be affected by food? But guess what? There's biochemical reactions. And I'm sure when we come back from break, Lizzie, if you can walk us through a few things, like we talked about how we could change up that person's crazy diet in the morning. And I know you work with a lot of other things too, because I've seen you doing like workouts online as well, and you do a bunch of other things. What are some of the things that you find you can think about this when we go to break. What are some of the main things that you find complaints from, especially women that are coming to you, if they're coming to you with complaints about their sex drive, or is it like dry vagina? I know I say these things just randomly, and some people are like, that's so uncomfortable. But if they're coming to you with these issues, what are some of the main complaints that you're finding with people? And do you find that people are talking about their sex life, or are they avoiding it? So I'd love to hear about that when we come back from break. So you're listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network, and we'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for The Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Interested in masturbating for money, copulating for consciousness, and pleasuring on purpose? 21 Days of Sexual Magicism with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic is an exploration of tools, processes, and actions that you can use to create more for your life, your body, your money inflows, and so much more. Graduated learning for all levels of interest. Learn at your own pace via video classes or join the yearly live class. Take a peek at www.milicajelienic.com.
How wonderful would it be to carry your favorite Inspired Choices Network host with you throughout your day? Well, now you can. Inspired Choices Network now has its very own mobile app. Our free app offers live streaming shows, along with thousands of podcasts and TV episodes. Our shows cover a wide variety of topics. Whether you're waking up with us, carrying us through the day, and taking us to bed with you, we're always here for you to enjoy. We're easy to find. Just search for Inspired Choices Network in the Apple App Store or Google Play Store.
This is The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email, info@milicajelienic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, my sweet pleasure seekers. I'm so glad you guys are listening in tonight to find out all about nutrition, your life, and we're going to get into a little bit of some fun questions about the Amish too coming up soon. But I first wanted to get back to Lizzie and find out two things. So first and foremost, if you want to get a hold of Lizzie, you can go to lizzieends.com. You can book time with her, book consultations with her. You can get her book as well. And you have another, do you have another website as well, Lizzie, that I don't have written down maybe in
I
front of my face
do.
right now?
I do.
Can you share
the
that?
other yeah, it's the other website is undietyourself.live.
Undietyourself.live. Awesome. So for those of you who are, yes, you can book, I think that's the one where you can go book the
Yes,
consultation,
that's where
right?
you
The
can book
undietyourself.live.
Mhm.
And you can go get the book and you can read all about Lizzie and have fun. And you can look forward to the movie, because I already swear there's going to be a movie. Like, just wait 3 to 5 years, there will be a movie about Lizzie's life, and then you guys can be like, hey, I saw her on the Pleasure Zone, that's so cool. So be like, yeah you did.
I know her.
It's funny who I've actually had on this show, and then it's like, whoa, look how famous they are, that's wild. But
Do you have a part in that?
I don't know if I did. I like to think that I contributed a little bit somehow, somewhere, like sending good vibes out. So it's kind of fun. So I think, yeah. So what I wanted to, what I was asking you about before we went to break was, what are some of the common things, or do people talk about that with you? Do you find that like women are secretly going, oh, I have this issue, it's sexual, and you're like, all right, let's get your labs done and see what's happening?
It's not something that's in the forefront for people, but I usually have to dig and just find out, like, hey, is this an issue for you? And if they're a mom with a lot of kids and or tired all the time, which is pretty common, that's definitely something that is typically an issue. Now, I will say this though, I have had clients in the past that their health was not great at all, and they really needed to do some healing, but because of the relationship that they had with their spouse, their sex life didn't suffer, because that was the one thing that they felt like they didn't have an issue with, which was pretty eye-opening for me, because for many in that situation and feeling the way they do, and their health in the place that it was, that typically becomes an issue. So
it does. So that's very cool to have that difference. I think I attract a lot of people who've gone through trauma. So they usually have the issues are there, and then it affects their health and the relationship. So that's so nice to hear that some people are having loving, healthy sex lives with their partners, and there's something else going on. So that's really cool. And so when you're working with them, obviously you're going through their labs, you're helping them with nutrition. For the most part, are you finding that, like, when after you're working with them for like I think your program is usually 3 months, like you do 3 month stints, are you finding like a lot of the reports back are saying, wow, actually, like, my life is coming back to me, I'm starting to, like, maybe not 100%, but it's starting to at least start to like bring back some feelings of like normalcy for them?
absolutely. The two first things that people usually start noticing is that they start feeling better, so they get more energy, and that's a big piece. The big piece of that is their nutrition and what their diet looks like. So really coming in, and most of my women that I work with, they need to eat more, and so the reason that they are tired is because they are not eating enough, and specifically not eating enough protein. And so once they start fueling their body and giving their body the energy that it really needs to function optimally, because here's the thing, you can survive on less calories. So let's just take your basal metabolic rate, for example. Let's say your basal metabolic rate is 1500. That's 1500 calories that your body at a bare minimum needs to keep functioning, even if you're Netflixing all day on the couch. Do people still do that?
Yeah, they do.
They do.
They really.
So you still get hungry if you do that, right?
Yeah.
You can survive on less calories than that. You can stay alive because the body is so extremely smart. It's going to start pulling from other areas. But what I tell everybody is you can survive, but that doesn't mean that you are functioning optimally. That doesn't mean you're sleeping well. It doesn't mean you have energy. It doesn't mean you feel good. And for most people, they're not losing weight at that state, even though they are in a massive calorie deficit. But because their body is so focused on keeping them alive and pulling energy from other areas, whether it's organs, fat cells, bones, whatever it is, it's going to pull wherever it can because it's so extremely smart. That's when it goes into survival mode. And where people don't understand is that you actually need more calories in order to feel better and get your metabolism going again and heal the gut, the hormones, and the thyroid, and get your energy back up so you actually feel like doing the things that you need to do in order to get healthy and lose the weight that you want to lose.
I love that. I love that because I totally freaking agree. And I've given people like recommendations, like here, just try this for a day and see what that looks like. And they're like, that's a lot of food. I'm like, I know, you actually require more nutrients than you think you do, and this is how you're going to get them. Yeah. So it's funny, but we really do. And what I think, like, you grew up Amish. Surprise, in case people didn't know, that when you're working hard all day long and you don't get to Netflix at night, you're working hard and you're eating hearty, right? So growing up, what were some of the things, like when you got out of being Amish, what were some of the things you noticed about the food? I would think that the food would be something you would have noticed pretty fast. Like, whoa, what are these people eating? Yeah. What was that like for you to see that?
I had to completely change my taste buds because the way that I was eating at home, there was not really any food like that around anywhere else. But I will tell you, I was like, a microwave is the best thing in the world because I don't have to cook. I can just pop it in there and like 2 seconds later, I got dinner. And now I'm like, I will not touch that microwave from 2 miles away. Keep it away from me.
I love it. That is so funny.
Microwaves and frozen dinners and going through a drive-through were like my 3 big things where I was like, yes, I don't have to cook. I've cooked for 19 years of my life. I don't have to anymore.
Wow.
But it was interesting because I started gaining weight just doing that. And I realized after a few years, I'm like, this isn't working. Like, this is not healthy. And what's different now, I will say this though, in the Amish community, you would think that they eat very healthy. You're right, they eat very hearty, but they should be eating really healthy. They have their own gardens and they raise their own animals they should be, but there's a lot of sugar. There's a lot of sugar that gets eaten. There's a lot of fried foods. Like, they fry their meat, like so many things, and there's a lot of really heavy stuff. Lots of butter and cream and
fried in lard too, right?
Like, and lard,
good lard like happening.
Fried in, yeah. The good stuff makes it taste so good. Lard will make the best pie crust you'll ever have.
Right.
The best.
I know my mom used to make pie crust out of lard back in the day.
Yep. Yeah. But the reality is when you look at the health of them, they're not that healthy. And because there's diabetes, there's heart disease, there's cancer, there's all of those things in there. And from the outside in, people think, oh, they're so healthy because they grow all their own stuff. But they're not, because of the way they cook it. And what I tell people is
hearty.
They're eating hearty, but you cannot outwork. It's the perfect example of you cannot outwork a bad diet.
Oh, I love it. That's so cool to hear. I do know, because I randomly get to speak with the Amish in our area. I'm allowed to speak with the women, and one of them actually said to me that one of the biggest problems they have is that, like, neighbors bringing candy to their kids, and they let their kids eat it, but they're like, we just don't have the things to, like, take care of their teeth after they've eaten all this stuff. Like, we don't have the was like, so why aren't they bringing you toothpaste then, and like bringing you or taking you to the dentist, like helping you out that way instead of bringing you candy, or not bring you candy at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's apparently like a big rush on candy for the Amish kids in this area, and they're all getting candy and sleds. I don't know, it's weird.
Interesting.
They all got sleds. They all got plastic sleds and candy.
Wow, that's crazy.
It's really weird.
That's pretty weird.
So we're gonna head to our next break, and when we come back, I got some interesting, fun, naughty questions for you about, what do you know about Amish and the sex lives of the Amish people, Lizzie? So we'll talk about that in our last 10 minutes. So you're listening to The Pleasure Zone. My sweet pleasure seekers will be right back after this commercial break.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for The Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. This is The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email. info@MilicaJelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, my sweet pleasure seekers. So for those of you who have been listening to the show, we've been talking a lot about nutrition, how it affects the body. I'm sure Lizzie could talk for a very long time about nutrition, how it affects the body, because as a board certified nutritionist, to get that license, I know in Canada to get that license, it's like you're studying the anatomy that's equivalent to the anatomy that medical doctors study. You're studying beyond the nutrition that dietitians study, because nutrition and dietitians are not the same. You are studying biochemistry of bodies, and you're understanding lab work. So it's actually a really big position. So for those of you who are like, nutritionists, yeah, a lot of nutritionists walk away from, after they've had their certification, they walk away because they feel pretty, I know many, so everyone I know, except for you, Lizzie, has pretty much walked away after having their certifications because they find it incredibly frustrating trying to work with people and people seeing the value of their work. So it's also in Canada, it's a little maybe different, but I think it's fantastic that you have a thriving business and you have been helping so many people, especially like working with hormones. And I think it's so funny, like to me, it's an irony. You grew up in a culture where probably you never even heard the word hormone in your life. And then this is like your specialty. So funny. So growing up, I'm just curious, like when you got your period, did you even know what was happening? Or was this like a mystery of the universe that happened to your body? Like what happened?
This is the perfect question. I'm so happy you asked. I was 10 and knew nothing about periods. And
wow.
I was still like going to school. And I remember like that morning, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm dying. I have to go to the hospital. So I run downstairs and I'm like, I tell my mom, I'm like, hey, I'm bleeding. Like something's wrong with me. I have to go to the hospital. And she's like, oh, it's not a big deal. You can stay home from school today. And then she like proceeds to tell me like, this is going to happen all the time. And I was like, what? This is not possible.
No warning. Oh, how scary.
No warning, nothing. And I was like, Mom, I have a test at school today. I can't skip school. I have to go to school. And she goes, and we walked 3 miles each way to go to school, 3 miles in the morning, 3 miles in the afternoon. And she goes, okay, you can go to school, but you can't run. You can only walk. So anytime you're on your period, you're not allowed to run. You can only walk.
That's so funny. That is so funniest rule I've ever heard. That's awesome.
So I went to school,
That's
but
so
I was
good.
in shock the entire day because I was like, what is
You
happening to
couldn't
my
run there.
body? I couldn't.
Oh man.
That was my intro to learning about
Wow.
periods.
Oh, that must have been frightening.
It was
So-
frightening. It was frightening.
So when you left Amish, did you I know you had like for those of you who haven't read her book, when you read her book and you hear her story, you know that Lizzie was helping out one of her sisters who had a baby.
Mm-hmm.
Like you knew babies existed because your mom, there's 18 of you, right? Or
There's
something
19.
outrageous, like there's
19,
19, sorry, 19.
Yeah.
18 siblings.
Don't forget
Holy
one.
Hannah. So your mom definitely knows how to have sex, but did she ever talk to you about what that is? Like after you had your period, did you have any like, hey, these things could happen and this could cause you to have a baby? There was like nothing happening there, like no discussion.
Nothing ever happened ever. Like they did not tell us anything. I found out at one point when I remember when my mom had like my 3 or 4 youngest siblings. And at some point, someone told me, yes, babies grow in your belly. And I was like, what?
Wow.
Where do they come out? Like it was so bizarre to me.
I'm
And
like,
so
how did
they're
they
like,
get in
oh,
there?
how did they get in? And how do they get out? Oh, they come out of your vagina. And I was like, what? How is that possible? So that's not even possible. So that got explained to me, but not from my parents. That was from a friend of mine in school.
Wow.
And then I didn't get told anything about sex until I got to the dating age, which was like 16. And the only thing my mom said was when the day that I was going to start dating, she said, keep your clothes on. That was it.
That was it.
Nothing else. Just keep your clothes
Wow.
on.
So when you
Yeah.
ran away, did you even know what sex was? Like when you're 19, you run away and you're like joining the world of the outside world where sex at 19 is pretty common. Like, I know we only have 2 minutes left, but what a great conversation this could be at another time. Just let's entice them for the next conversation, Lizzie. Like, what was your, like, did you know about it? And like, how did you approach that?
I did know about it by that time. And let's be real, Milica, we grew up on a farm. We saw a lot of things.
Okay, so you saw animals doing things.
You saw
Yeah.
animals doing things. So you
Yeah.
get curious. I did, and you'll learn, like when you read the book, you'll see how I learned about it. I'm not going to say it
Cool.
right now, but you'll
I
see
love
how I
it.
learned
So go
about
get the
it.
book and learn.
That's
Learn
right.
how Lizzie learned about it. That's awesome. But no,
Yeah.
I wondered if there was like conversations or if like, does the mother pass this information on, or is it kind of hush hush and you do have to watch the animals and go, hey, the doggy
What's
just did
that?
that to the other doggy. What was that? And why are the cats making that noise? Because I remember thinking that when I was 12, like, oh, my cats are dying outside. And my mom's like, they're not dying, just chill out. And I'm like, but why is the cat hurt? And mom's like, it's not hurt. And then finally she surrendered and she's like, it's making babies. I'm like, that sounds awful. I was mortified. I was like, I don't think I want to make babies if that's what it's like that poor cat. That sounds awful.
I mean, we had conversations, and as teenagers talk, so it would always come around eventually. But as far as like when they're pregnant, they don't really tell anybody. Like my mom was pregnant so many times and they never told us that she was going to have a baby ever.
Wild. And then all of a sudden Miracle Baby shows up out of
Oh
nowhere.
yeah,
There's the
no, it was not, I think it was my last sister. I can't remember. One of my younger sisters, I remember waking up one morning and I just hear baby cry and I go downstairs and there she was.
Wow, that's wild. If you guys have enjoyed this conversation as much as I have with Lizzie, go get her book at lizzieens.com. You can go find her at undiet.live as well. I want to thank you, Lizzie, for being on the show. I'm sure we could have more conversations about this because I have lots of questions about the Amish and their lifestyles, but also about you and your expertise. So I look forward to talking to you again sometime soon. So for those of you listening, stay tuned and turned on until next week.
Thank you for listening to The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. The Pleasure Zone returns next Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Mountain, and 5 p.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. We hope you'll join us. Until then, have the best week of your life by choosing to be turned on and tuned in to your body.